what's clearly developing. Perestroika, is that the Soviet word that the General Secretary uses to talk about the restructuring that he has begun of Soviet society? And he here in Washington calls for a restructuring of world society. And the president seems somehow to be caught up in this a little bit. Now, I know that conservatives who still mistrust the Soviets so are going to be horrified by that. And I dare say tomorrow you're going to hear a lot of people complaining in this town and elsewhere about President Reagan's newfound friendship for Mikhail Gorbachev. But Ronald Reagan clearly is caught up, and clearly seems to be reflecting that in his public speeches today.
Sam, what I would like to do for primarily our Russian viewers tonight is show you, this is tomorrow morning's Washington Post. I know that most of you are not going to be able to read the headline, but if I read it to you, I trust it will be translated for you. Reagan, Gorbachev signed nuclear missile treaty. As you can see, it is very big news here in the United States. And I'd be very interested now, Vladimir, if you'd be good enough to give us a sense of how all of this is being received in the Soviet Union.
Я бы хотел узнать, как это все было при Сталином Советском Союзе.
Thank you, Ted. Firstly, I'd also like to show you today's version of Pravda. You can see on the first page, it talks about the treaty which was signed today by Mikhail Gorbachev and Mr. Reagan. And here is a photograph of the actual moment of signing the treaty. And here the message of Ronald Reagan and Mr. Gorbachev. And then, Ted, you've just shown us how you're publicizing the visit of our leader to Washington. I should like to, in return, show you exactly how we've done this. Please look and listen.
May I ask you, and I realize this is a terrible thing to do on such short notice, could you hold it for 1 second? We have this terrible old tradition in this country, as you know. Our programs are sponsored, and perhaps I've found that sometimes this is what a Russian audience is most interested in. Perhaps your audience will find these commercials intriguing, but we have to show them in this country, and then I promise you we'll come right back to you in Moscow. A commercial break.
Seltsam.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Unisys.
I'd like a deposit check, please.
Jeffrey Houdray has never heard of Unisys.
All the way from France.
It's from my grandfather.
Have a seat.
But Unisys systems process half of the checks in the U.S. each day. 30 of the world's 50 largest banks rely on Unisys for everything from international bank transfer to quick customer service. Jeffrey just knows that a new 10-speed bike is almost his. Unisys and banking, the power of two.
All the stars were there that night. My assignment, sneak some photos. I was packing my automatic, the Canon Sure Shot Supreme. She threw me a smile. He threw me his dinner. He missed his shot, but I got mine. Close-up shots, low-light shots. Thanks to my Sure Shot, I got every shot I wanted. And one I didn't want. The Canon Sure Shot Supreme.
Canon, official 35mm camera of the 1988 Winter Olympics.
If you're looking for super sparkle this Christmas season, come see our romantic holiday collection. We'll make sure you make a grand entrance to any seasonal party in one of our super looks. From our holiday dresses with that special sparkle to our exciting junior sportswear, Ormond has the look that's just right for you.
No payments in December, then next year, no payments in January, no payments in February, no payments in March, no payments in April, no payments in May, no payments in June, no payments in July, no payments in August. Richard Smith announces no payments till September 1988 or over $2,500 cash back, just in time for your holiday shopping. Own Nashville's #1 nameplate, the Pontiac Grand Am. That's right, no payments till September 88 or over $2,500 cash back for the holidays and no down payments. Only at Richard Smith in Murfreesboro.
The day after showed us the horrors of nuclear war. Is the world now safer? The townspeople where it was filmed react tomorrow on ABC's World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
I realize this is rather difficult to coordinate. Forgive me, folks. I was just talking to my counterpart in Moscow, Vladimir Molchonov. They just showed a report as we went to a commercial. We just came back from our commercial, Vladimir. What was it that you were showing while we were gone?
Я бы хотел спросить Владимира Молчанова, что в тот период, когда мы показывали рекламный ролик, вы тоже что-то показали советским телезрителям. Я бы хотел спросить, что вы показывали в этот момент?
Да, мы как раз начали
We started to show a clip which we wish to show you, and now it's going to appear on our monitors. Please switch it on now.
We're watching.
Давайте посмотрим.
That's the arrival, Ted.
Сегодня все мы стали свидетелями
Today, everybody was witness to a significant event in international relations of the 80s, possibly not only of the 1980s. The General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and the President of the United States signed the treaty on the full elimination of Soviet and American medium and shorter-range nuclear missiles. And in fully assessing the significance of this event, mankind is entering an epoch of the elimination of nuclear weapons. All of us who live on one and the same planet, each and every one of us understands that we can die or survive only together. The ancient people left us their commandment, why should you die? Live and flourish for your sake and the sake of your children. And our hands on the clock of history have come close to the minute of nuclear apocalypse. Today, those hour hands have been pushed backward. That was done in Washington by Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev and by Ronald Reagan. The interests of mankind have finally won over class distinctions, mutual recriminations, and the image of the enemy. And having come through Reykjavik, after which disappointment was felt, the treaty has been signed today in Washington. The treaty on the elimination of medium and shorter-range nuclear missiles, regarding its political and psychological significance for international relations, is a treaty which is an event of revolutionary importance. We very much want to believe that it will be followed by an agreement on 50% reduction in strategic offensive weapons. And further, towards our dream of a non-nuclear world, which we would like to make a reality. Speaking today in Washington after the signing of the treaty, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union said, "What we have achieved is only a beginning. It is only a start to nuclear disarmament, although, as is well known, even the longest journey begins with the first step." And this trip is one in which we must travel together.
So, there's the clip which we wish to show you and to comment on. And now, I propose that we start our discussion. And first, I'd like to ask you, what's going on right now in Washington?
Well, it is now 5 minutes after midnight here in Washington, and if I may ask your indulgence for one more minute, we're going to have to do that thing that I'm sure is so incomprehensible to your audience. But we do it all the time here. We keep interrupting our programs with commercial breaks. We have to take one more commercial break, and then I do promise we'll come back and we'll have that discussion.
The essence of the emerald, captured in a fragrance. Surround yourself in its mystery. Emerald.
Presenting the Skill Twist cordless power screwdriver versus your ordinary screwdriver.
Come on, baby, let's do the twist. Come on, baby, let's do the twist. Take it in your hand and go like this.
It's a new twist on an old idea at hardware stores and home centers everywhere.
Make him a legend in his own time. Give him British Sterling Musk or the original fragrance in special gift packages from the British Sterling collection. British Sterling, the legend continues.
I get a lot of credit for giving great gifts. My secret? Nashville trunk, of course. Decipher 2, Executive Dartboard, How to Host a Murder, Pictionary. Unique challenges from 1250. The beauty of brass, the uniqueness of World Time Touch, the timeliness of Seiko from 3950. What's better than the wish book? Even more great gifts. Right in the store. Either way, it's a foolproof plan. The trunk does all the work, and I get all the credit. Nashville Trunk and Bag.
After over 65 years and just in time for Christmas, United Jewelry is going out of business. The owner is retiring and must sell all of his inventory. Diamond, ruby, emerald, and sapphire rings, earrings, and pendants. Citizen watches, fine pearls, gold chains, all being liquidated for prices available only when a fine jewelry store goes out of business. This is a sale on everything in the store, not what somebody wants to get rid of. This year, you can afford to give something nicer and save big from the great going out of business sale at United Jewelry in the Arcade downtown and Brentwood House Shopping in Brentwood. No payments in December, then next year, no payments in January, no payments in February, no payments in March, no payments in April, no payments in May, no payments in June, no payments in July, no payments in August. Richard Smith announces no payments till September 1988 or over $2,500 cash back, just in time for your holiday shopping. Own Nashville's #1 nameplate, the Pontiac Grand Am. That's right, no payments till September 88 or over $2,500 cash back for the holidays and no down payments. Only at Richard Smith in Murfreesboro.
Now that the arms treaty has been signed, what will it cost to get rid of the missiles and keep the Soviets honest? Tomorrow, watch ABC's World News This Morning before Good Morning America.
Tomorrow, more live coverage of the summit.
Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger will discuss the INF Treaty.
Plus Soviet spokesman Gennady Gerasimov.
Tomorrow on Good Morning America.
And we are back once again with our attempt at combining two programs.
Could I repeat my question, or did you?
Yes, please do. Just let me reintroduce you. Joining me, of course, is Vladimir Molchanov, the host of the Soviet television program 90 Minutes. With me here in our studio is Sam Donaldson. And Vladimir, you've been very patient. Please, go ahead.
Ted,
I don't know whether you heard before, I asked you a question. Those people we managed to talk to in Moscow after the signing of the treaty between the Soviet Union and the United States were extremely optimistic about a safe future for both of us and a safer future for the entire world. And what is the prevailing mood now in America?
Well, it may be a little bit early, Vladimir, to give you the sense of a prevailing mood in America, but it is impossible to see the leader of the Soviet Communist Party and his wife and the entire Soviet leadership come here and be hosted with as much optimism and even a sense of joy as has been the case here today, without feeling that things are certainly moving in a much better direction. But I must turn to the expertise of my colleague Sam Donaldson, who covers the White House for a living, who is something of a cynic on occasion. I hope he won't be offended if I say that. Sam, do you feel that the mood is generally an optimistic one over here?
Well, I think the mood, Vladimir, over signing this new treaty is optimistic. Most of our public opinion polls show that most Americans are in favor of reducing armaments and are in favor of this particular treaty. But I must say to you in all candidness that the strain between our two countries, as you know, runs very deep. It's run very deep for a long time. And it's not going to be swept away with the signing of one treaty or with the visit of one general secretary who is young and aggressive and modern and knows how to use television, as does our president. And I think it's going to take a lot more than just this one thing. For instance, Vladimir, you must understand, I know, that the general secretary and the president are talking about such things as regional conflicts. And Ronald Reagan is asking the General Secretary, when are you going to get out of Afghanistan? When are you going to stop using your influence, in our sense, for ill in Angola, in Ethiopia, in Nicaragua?
The Persian Gulf.
The Persian Gulf. And what about human rights? Now, these questions we may have differences on, but the point is we do have differences. They run very deep, and they're simply, unless your attitude changes, or ours does, and I don't foresee that, on the questions I've just mentioned, we're not going to have anything but 2 or 3 flowers peeking up through the snow for a while. There isn't going to be a complete thaw.
Well, it was, in fact, as your General Secretary said in his remarks today, Vladimir, what has begun here, what has been planted, is a sapling And as he hoped, we all hope that it will someday grow into a giant oak.
Но мы надеемся, что со временем наши разногласия станут меньше, и мы увидим с вами потепление в наших отношениях.
Мы тоже надеемся на это.
We also hope that this will happen, Ted. And may I ask you and Sam Donaldson about the following. What is your forecast about the ratification of the treaty on the treaty in the Senate? The SALT II hasn't been yet ratified by the United States, may I remind you.
Well, I have absolutely no predictions on SALT II, but I must say I think the INF Treaty that was just signed by your leader and our leader today, unless something extraordinary happens, I think it will in fact be signed, probably sometime in the early spring. Sam?
I agree with you, Ted. I think the will there is to ratify this treaty, or technically the Senate approves ratification by the President. There are estimated about 20 senators, which is not enough to defeat the treaty, who at the moment suggest that they're going to vote against it. But of course, we can't foretell events. You mentioned SALT II, Vladimir. It was on the Senate docket for discussion and potential ratification when your country moved into Afghanistan. And that one act caused that treaty to be taken off of the Senate docket. So if you will tell me what the future of the next 2 or 3 months holds, then I'll be able to tell you more about whether ratification is a lead pipe cinch or not. May we ask Vladimir a question, Ted?
I think as soon as... Yeah, please, go ahead.
Да, пожалуйста.
Yes, please do.
Можете спрашивать не только меня,
You can ask not only me, but all the guests who are with us here in the studio.
Well, let me ask you a question that many Americans really wonder about, and that is Afghanistan. We keep hearing that perhaps you've made a political decision to withdraw, but we want a timetable. What do you think the Soviet people think about their troops in Afghanistan now? For a longer time than you fought the Germans in World War II. Don't they want to withdraw?
О пребывании советских войск в Афганистане. Не могли бы вы нам сказать, мы полагаем, насколько мы понимаем, Советский Союз принял решение вывести свои войска из Афганистана. Не могли бы вы уточнить сроки вывода советских войск?
Насколько мне известно,
as far as I know, Sam, the Soviet troops will be withdrawn from Afghanistan over in a period of 12 months or even earlier, provided that certain powers, including the United States, of course, put an end to or stop supplying weapons to the Dushmans who are fighting against the authorities in present Afghanistan. A few days ago, this was a statement was made by the President of Afghanistan to that effect.
Well, of course, you see that there's the rub between us. We believe that the Mujahideen, who are fighting for their country, have every right to continue to do that. We believe that it is the Soviet Union that invaded Afghanistan.
Душманы, или как мы их называем, борцы за веру, они имеют полное право бороться за свободу своей страны.
У нас действительно немало разногласий.
Yes, there are a number of disagreements between us, but we will try, I think, to gradually remove these misunderstandings. Now, Alexei Arbatov would like to ask you a question as well.
I'd like to know, what do you think? Is progress possible in negotiations on reductions in strategic weapons? And how quickly do you think the sides can reach agreement on this matter?
Well, I think it is quite clear that what can be negotiated fairly easily is a reduction of up to 50%. But one of your academicians over here in a meeting at Stanford University over the weekend suggested that what General Secretary Gorbachev is going to propose somewhere down the line, possibly even while he is here in Washington, is a 95% reduction in strategic weapons. And that, of course, would be quite extraordinary, and we must remember that this INF Treaty, which has just been signed today, calls for the removal of those intermediate-range missiles over a period of 3 years. So even as we talk about these agreements being reached, I think it's only fair to remind our audience here in the United States and your audience over there in the Soviet Union that a reduction of strategic nuclear missiles would probably be something that would be spread out over a period of many years. But is it possible? In the current atmosphere, it seems that almost anything is possible.
Этот процесс, возможно, растянется на несколько лет. Его нельзя будет осуществить сразу.
I understand. You said that it would be rather easy to reach a 50% reduction agreement. Does that mean that we could just as easily come to an agreement on reductions and compliance with the ABM Treaty, which, as you know, is the basis of the entire regime for arms limitation right now and of strategic stability?
Well, I must tell you, Mr. Abatov, that from here, your emphasis on the ABM Treaty strikes us as a rather interesting tactic. Up until very recently, as you know, your government has been placing a great deal of emphasis on SDI, on the Strategic Defense Initiative. Suddenly, it seems there has been a change in tactics in which instead of the Soviet Union being difficult on the issue of SDI, it is now being put in terms of, well, after all, SDI is something that is for the American Congress to decide, and it has to be decided within the context of the ABM Treaty. I think it is an interesting move on your government's part, a very clever one, and it clearly is the subject of debate in our own Congress. But if you're counting on the American Congress to do away with SDI, that may be a little bit premature.
Ваша позиция несколько изменилась, и вы придерживаетесь следующей позиции. В конце концов, программа «Звездных войн», ну, в общем-то, пускай решает американский Конгресс, как с ней поступать.
And if I may, I'd just like to interrupt myself to say to our affiliates down the line, we're going to be running just a minute or two over. This program, as I hope you can understand, is a little more complex than those that we normally do. Is there some way that perhaps we can wrap this up on either a question or a comment from Moscow?
Могли бы мы как-то получить по этому вопросу какой-то комментарий из Москвы?
Безусловно.
Of course, the Star Wars program, in some of its serious aspects, comes into conflict with the ABM Arms Treaty. And in that sense, your Congress, as we know, had very animated debates regarding the so-called broad interpretation of the ABM Treaty. If Star Wars were fully in keeping with the ABM Treaty, then there wouldn't be any problem regarding a broad interpretation.
So again, as I suggested, it is your sense then that the American Congress will do what you have been saying has to be done, and that is to destroy the SDI program, at least insofar as its implementation is concerned. Is that what you're telling me?
Вы мне говорите о том, что, в общем-то, это дело Конгресса, решать о том, что сделать с программой «Звездных войн». Насколько я вас понимаю, вы это мне хотите сказать?
What I want to say is that everyone is well aware that the Star Wars programs is in contradiction with the ABM Treaty in certain questions. And regarding those questions, there was that whole question of the so-called broad implementation of the ABM Treaty, which was not in keeping with its traditional, genuine, and true understanding.
Well,
Congress, as is well known, favored the traditional understanding of the ABM Treaty. That is, you can't test out a system of new physical principles in outer space. That's what the question of the traditional understanding boils down to.
Mr. Abatov, what you have done very eloquently is to underscore what my colleague Sam Donaldson was saying just a moment ago. We still have a ways to go, and the euphoria of the moment, the euphoria of this current visit, is still masking, I suspect, some real problems that your country and our country have to overcome. But I do want to express my deepest appreciation to all of you. I know this was an imposition on your program, and you've been very gracious in hosting us and in being a part of Nightline this evening. So I'd like to express my thanks to all of you for being with us, and of course my thanks to my friend and colleague Sam Donaldson. We'll have a program note in just a moment.